Hello, and welcome to another edition of Days of Learning. I'm your host, David Nelson, and our Days of Learning podcast is sponsored at this time by the 1815 grant. I am so thrilled to have this guest on the show. I've been excited since we got her booked a couple of weeks ago. I have known Miss Yvonne Greer for going on 14 years, and she has taught me a tremendous amount of information about the community. I'm going to read a little bit from her bio, and frankly, we don't have enough time for me to read the whole bio, but she has done a lot of outstanding work in the community. Miss Yvonne Greer, MPH, registered dietitian, clinical dietitian, owner of Why Eat Right, nutritional consultant for healthy living, conducts special workshops to promote healthy nutritional and living behaviors. She has been featured on talk radio and print and TV, including a health promotion television documentary entitled A Silent Threat, Heart Disease in African American Women, circa 2003. Ms. Greer was featured in the Madison Times newspaper as a follow-up to the nutrition workshop Celebrating Life with Healthy Eating and Physical Activity, sponsored by the African American Network of Health of Dane County in 2005. She's also filled an episode at a local supermarket for the Channel 1036 TV program, Black Nouveau, speaking on the topic of healthy shopping on a budget, which aired in March of 2011 and repeated several times throughout the summer. Of special note, Ms. Greer has held the position of nutritionist coordinator with the City of Milwaukee Health Department for 22 years before taking early retirement in December of 2011 to pursue her private practice in full times. Ms. Greer is recognized as an accomplished writer for both public news, print, and educational peer-reviewed applied research publications. She's authored the book chapters Diabetes and Obesity in Tops, Take Off Pounds Sensibly, publication Real Life, the Hands-On Pounds Off Guide in 2013, as well as the Curricula Guide for Community, Youth, and Family Agency entitled Back to the Kitchen, Healthy Cooking Series, June 2013. Also in 2013, she was an expert contributor to the Get Active Today Health and Wellness website, writing a weekly nutrition column. She also wrote a series of bi-monthly nutrition blogs for the online newspaper Diabetes Scares.net, which was still featured today. Ms. Greer has been a partner in several program grant initiatives, including the Milwaukee Childhood Obesity Prevention Program, the Milwaukee Mobile Market Nutrition Education Project, and the Wisconsin Beverage Association Children's Audio Association Healthy Lifestyle Initiative. She has done more things, served on more committees, and received more accolades than I have time to go over. But it is a joy to welcome Miss Yvonne Greer. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you, David. I always say I do so much because I don't think about it. When I hear it, it always sounds like a lot, but it's a labor of love.
You know, I want to get into that labor of love today because I've known you for a long time, and I know that you are a tireless advocate for the community. But I want to start really at the beginning of your journey in health and wellness and, you know, the idea of a dietitian and what it means. Tell us your background.
Well, my background is that I was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm a product of the Milwaukee public school system. And at a very young age, I saw my mother, who was a nursing assistant in the hospitals, and my father was an Islamic minister. And everybody seemed to be working for the good of people. And the idea that they would ask me, what do you want to do for a living? What do you want to do when you grow up? I kept saying, I don't know, but whatever I do, I want to help people to live long and healthy lives. But one of the big things that happened when I was 12 years old is that my grandmother slipped into a coma, and we had to rush her to the hospital. I didn't have any idea what could happen. And we were at the hospital until 1 o'clock in the morning. So they said she was stabilized. We came back the next day and they said she was sitting up, smiling, laughing. And I was like, well, what could have happened? And the nurse said, oh, she'll be fine. She's just a diabetic. She'll have to watch what she eats. At 12 years old, that stuck with me, and I couldn't understand how what you eat can have you in a coma one day and sitting up the next day. And that really sparked my attention. And I was actually scared to be a dietitian. I thought, oh my God, if I don't do this right, somebody could end up in a coma. So for a good long time, and when I was in my internship, they had to tell me it doesn't happen that fast, that you don't have to be afraid. But it was something that really intrigued me. But one of the mission moments that I tell people is that as 25 years old, now you're talking about 13 years later, as a registered dietitian, when my grandmother was getting sick, and I said, make sure you have your bread servings and your fruit servings so that, she had a flu or whatever, so you don't get sick. She said, yes, baby. Yes, baby. Mm-hmm. But do you know she ended up going into into the hospital again in renal failure and all sorts of things. And I found out she never received a diet instruction from a dietitian. And from then on, I said, my mission moment is to reach as many people as I can to make sure that they're getting the nutrition message, because it makes a difference in their health and wellness. She didn't live but about 6 months after that. And my mother was always scared she was going to die early. But guess what? She had a dietitian in the family. When she was diagnosed with diabetes, I gave her instructions. I taught her how to eat healthy and stuff. My mother, the only time she calls me about her health is when she calls me to tell her how good her hemoglobin A1Cs are. And then she's now 83 years old and doing fine. So that's my mission moment, my story. It really is the foundation of being into the field. But there's been some twists and turns in between there that brought me to public health and now to a private practice dietitian.
I want to go back a little bit, because you spoke of your father as a minister and your mother within healthcare. Talk about their influence, and your grandmother, but talk about your mom and dad and their influence on your life.
Well, that's one of the key things that I have also mentioned to people is that my mother and father were divorced. They were divorced, as many families are. So when they say single family household, and my mother was raising 4 children. So that was an impact on our life, because although my father was a minister and he was in our life and he had great influence, and I do speak to the importance of fathers in their lives, because he used to ask me what I wanted to be and I would tell him. But when it was time for Father's Day, I gave him a trophy. I went to find a little trophy. I was a little girl, found a little trophy saying the world's greatest cook. The world's greatest cook. My father was surprised, because he took us over to his house and he had to cook for us. And that was my image of a dad, cooking for their children. So again, nutrition is coming back in there. But with my mom, we had what we call feast or famine. We had times when she, had great money, bought all this beautiful food. We had fresh salmon. We had steaks. We had all kind of food in abundance. But she only really got paid maybe once a month or once every 2 weeks. It was wherever it was. We didn't get that kind of food all the time. When it was when that food was gone, we had what I call famine, wherein the only thing we had in the house was, she always kept potatoes. She always kept apples, fresh potatoes, and then we had ketchup. So when things were low, we would make these big plates of French fries, and then we would make a baked apple, and that was our dessert. So our whole meal was French fries with ketchup and baked apples. Give you a story. One of the times, I invited one of my friends over for lunch, and it was one of them lean times. But as a child, I didn't really know. I had something to eat. I didn't know anything about it. And she invited me over to her house. Her mom was a stay-at-home mom. We had sandwiches, beautiful meal. So when she came over to my house, my mother worked. She worked all night, and then she slept most of the day. And then she went to another job at around 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So it was crazy system that we was there alone most of the time, or she was sleeping most of the time. So I took her over there. I made the French fries and baked apple because it was lean times, and I was happy. I had my friend over. Years later, when I met up with her after I was almost out of college and had my children, and I saw her and I gave her a ride or whatever, and she started telling me about how she didn't know we were so poor. And then I was like, poor? I'm like, I didn't think we were poor. I had a conversation with my brother. My brother said, we were poor. And I'm thinking, nobody ever told me we were poor. And so, the idea of perceptions.
Yes.
People think that little children that is in low income housing think they're poor. And they may not even know about poor. They just want something to eat. They just living their life. And I used to say, when I did a talk as the chief nutritionist for the health department, and we were opening up a new food pantry and a food service program. And I told my story, but I didn't tell who it was. And I said, well, you never know. Those children that's getting that extra food that from this food program might grow up to be a doctor, a lawyer, even the chief nutritionist for the City of Milwaukee Health Department. I said, and that's where another part of my passion comes from. My mother was my first nutrition educator. And when I asked her, what could I be when I grew up? She said, be a dietitian. She said she worked in St. Luke's Hospital, and she saw the nutritionists in the dietary department. And she said, they tell people how to eat to live. Remember, I wanted to help people live healthy. And then she said, and they don't take any stuff from nobody. And I thought, woo. And she told me at school, they had a field trip to a hospital. I don't even remember this, but she'll tell the story to everybody. And she said, I would go to other places. I didn't say anything about anything. And she said, one day I went to the dietary department in a hospital and saw the tray line that, you put your food on, and had different people putting things on from different stations. And she said, I came back, and she said, I saw the most wonderful thing. And it was the funniest thing to me, but now that I hear about it, but she said I was going on and on and on about the tray line and how wonderful it was. And she said she couldn't believe it, but it just was such an interest to me. So that's what, kind of prompted me to go into dietetics. One other thing that prompted me is that my creative writing teacher, she told me, if she would ask me, what do we want to be when we grow up? And I said, either a dietitian, because my mother had told me about that, or a creative writing teacher. And she said, be a dietitian. She said they make good money, they have good hours, and there's a lot of starving journalists out there. So I said, that's still the deal. But at 16, I graduated from high school. And at 16, I decided to be a dietitian, and I've never changed since.
I want to talk about this idea that you said in our family, we had feast or famine, yet we didn't know we were poor.
Right.
Talk about that, what your mom did.
She made sure, so the reason why she worked third shift is so she can be there in the morning when we was ready to go to school, get us up, get us dressed, get us fed. So she always cooked home cooked food, and she always made sure we had something to eat before we went to school. If the bake sales wanted something, she would bake cakes for the bake sale. When we got off of school, she would have a full dinner, or we could sit in the kitchen and see her cook dinner. But remember, she most of the time had the full-time job working at night and a part-time job. So once we were fed and things, once my sister got to be probably around 14, 15, she didn't get babysitters anymore. When we were real little, she did, but after a while, we were, from 7 to 13, 14 in the house. And we functioned like that. We functioned with her gone, which is crazy. I remember 7 or 8 years old being in the house by myself. So when they talk about latchkey kids and these people, sometimes we don't know that is it. You know, people are doing the best they can to feed their family. She had to work 2 jobs. Now we had a dad, and he, you know, gave support and stuff, but there is so much more to raising kids than just a one check. And sometimes, you know, those incidentals, we would just fight over who's going to ask dad for money this time. No, I got shoes. I need some shoes. You got shoes last time. He's only going to give so much money out. We knew that. So it was like, and then we get mad at my big sister because she didn't care. She's going to get her money, you know. So the reality of living in a low income situation, I totally understand that. And so some people think, oh, they just don't take responsibility for this and that and the other. But when you don't have anything in the bank and you got to live from paycheck to paycheck, you do have to make those decisions of, am I going to pay rent, lights, gas? Am I going to buy food? Am I going to go, you know, try to go to food stamps, food banks? And sometimes when you make just a little bit money over the guidelines, you don't qualify. When you don't qualify, that in between not qualifying and not really having enough money, that's a bad place to be in, even though you know that you're working hard. So that working poor means sometimes you don't qualify for nothing. So some people get on the people who say, I can't make that much because then they'll cut my money off. Mm-hmm. Their life might be a little easier because they're not making that extra little money. So I've always been a proponent that something needs to be done about that. Maybe they should give them at least a year to make them extra money and still get the assistance before they cut them off. But nope, every month, if you make a little bit more over and you don't report it, you can get cut off. And then sometimes they will sanction you and make you pay back everything because they thought you defrauded. And all you're doing is trying to, you know, survive.
Just
so this is the real story, you know.
Well, it's a good one. And I am struck with the image of French fries, ketchup, and a baked apple. And here's why. Because it would be easy to say, let's just have French fries or let's just have an apple. But your mom baked the apple.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is
and the mom didn't bake the apple. We all baked the apple. We did it ourselves. 7 or 8 years old, I'm making my own French fry, my own baked apple.
It was done with love, though.
Yeah, yeah. And see, those ingredients were always there to be able to make that up. And then once we got the food, we would like jumping for joy to see the bags being taken out in the house. And then we're eating fresh salmon. I mean, we ate the best of food, but feast or famine. And I tried to tell a church group about this idea that nobody can sustain themselves 100% on food stamps. So don't think they're totally milking the system that much, because it's not that much. And they, you know, many times they might have something in the beginning and then got to stretch all of that out to get another one. And many times they're saying it runs out on the 3rd week. So that 4th week is like famine. And so, you know, the idea, you know, I was trying to give that analogy, and then some person said they didn't really get it. They said they shouldn't eat steak. They shouldn't eat salmon. And I'm thinking, they're just human beings. If when you've been starved, you want something good when you finally can eat. You don't want to eat junk when you finally can eat something. That's enough to eat something good. That, you know, you don't think they know what salmon tastes like or steak tastes like. So you don't think they'll ever want to eat any of it. But they felt like if you low income, you shouldn't eat anything good.
Yvonne, I'm gonna name this thing. Is this another form of oppression and part of structural racism that exists within our community?
I believe it is, because it definitely keeps people depressed and down if you look at them so negatively when they're just trying to survive. And it does create that less than mentality even for children. See, because I had parents that never let us feel less than. Never let money or anything make us feel less than. I can go into any area and feel confident, even though I don't have as much as other people. I've never had that less than feeling. But that's because think my dad was a minister and leading a group of people. My mom, she was in the health, even when she was a nurse and aide, she went on to be a technical, a surgical technician, and was on the surgical team and that type of thing. She was steadily trying to improve herself. And then they instilled in us, just get your education, go to college, even if we have to, take financial aid. And all of my brothers and sisters have degrees.
I want to say, because I go back to the basis of your family was love.
Yes.
And I love that your mom and dad both said, and this is where we need more of this. We need that underlying tone in our community of, what do you want to be?
Right.
And even your teachers, what do you want to be? And your thought of being a creative writing teacher or a dietitian.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? And I think you obtain both, because I think you do a bit of both creativity as well as being the dietitian.
I had 4 main things I wanted to do. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to be eventually a dietitian, and the creative writer teacher. I think it was one other thing, but guess what? Nutrition is a science. I'm writing newsletter articles and newsletters, and I'm writing for publication. And then also, food, nutrition, and dietetics. And I said I wanted to help people live long and healthy lives. And I'm doing that with the nutrition education and empowerment. And mine is an empowerment coaching kind of model. Anything that I do is more so to develop skill building, behavioral change, and for the individual to understand and where their focus on their own health should be, versus me just say, eat this, eat that. No, they need to own the choices that they make. And that way I'm creating a lifestyle, a healthy living that hopefully will have them living long and healthy lives. And that's like I said, that was the main goal from the start to finish, is to help people to live long and healthy lives. But see, the difference is when you look in, and I'm really focusing now on this racial equity lens and looking at, the lenses that you use to look at people. I look at all people with respect, with a lens that they are making it with the bodies, regardless of what shape, size, whatever they're living at. And sometimes I even start my program off at everybody in the whole room taking a deep breath together and breathing out. I said, we all doing that together. This is part of living. No matter what size you are worthy to be here, and you can make your life healthier at any stage, weight, shape, size you are at. And I can help you do that. So it's really saying, coming from a place of respect, I'm going to learn where the person is and help them to build a better life for themselves, not me just going telling them what to do, what the solutions are. Like I try to tell my students, accept whatever food people eat, and then see if you can help them to get ideas on how to make their own diet healthier. I had a guy who says one of his favorite sandwiches was peanut butter and steak sandwiches. He said, I bet you never heard of that. I said, hell no, I didn't never hear of that. But I said, if that's what you like, then great. But maybe you should have a salad on the side, or, I started adding in some things, and then, give him some ideas of the timing if you're on the road, because he was a trucker, so different things. But it's meeting people where they're at and helping them to have skills to improve their life.
How have people responded to that aspect of respect, Yvonne? Because that really has been you're naming it, has been a hallmark as I think about the times I've known you and over the years. That really has been a foundational principle for you. How have people responded to that from a nutrition perspective?
From a nutrition perspective, I think they respond very well to it, because what happens is that they're reluctant to tell their truth about what they eat, and when they eat it, to many dietitians, because they feel like they're going to be ridiculed. People already assess if they're eating healthy or not. It's not that they don't come with a certain knowledge. So you talk about nutrition education and you think people don't have any education. Many people have an education of what they should eat, but they're not incorporating it into their lifestyle. So with the respect that they give me, they tell me exactly what they really eat, when they really eat it. If they go to the club at night and want to have a dinner and go out and eat breakfast before they go home, they'll tell me. They may not tell another dietitian. Or if they know that they really have that nightlife style where they stay out half the night, sleep, in on Saturday until 1 or 2, and then they're eating all different times, they will tell me. They won't tell other people. I had one dietitian, say for instance, I was over at the old Isaac Cox before this new Isaac Cox, but it was an old Isaac Cox Health Center. And I was doing nutrition classes, and I had 30, 40 people coming every 2 weeks. They decided they needed their own dietitian at the clinic because I was at the health department coming in, and they saw the response to it. And they got their own dietitian. Well, it was a different dietitian. I had to say it was a Caucasian dietitian. And she was doing, and I feel like she was a great dietitian. However, she's working cross-culturally. And it's more of a challenge than you think to counsel older African-American clients cross-culturally if you don't know how to cook the food, if you don't know the sentiment that goes into the food. The ideas of saying, well, you should just cook greens by just boiling them a little bit and don't season them. One of my old clients, she came up to me and she said, "Oh, hi, Miss Greer." She said, "Oh my God." She said, "We really miss you." She said, "That little dietitian is really nice, but she told us just that not to boil our greens too long and don't put nothing in there." And she said she needs your help. She said, "Cause we'll say yeah." She said, "But ain't nobody gonna eat them greens like that." She said, and she was laughing and she was trying to be respectful, but she was telling the truth. That there's a certain cultural sensitivity or cultural knowledge base that if it doesn't sound like it's doable or going to make sense, they're not going to follow it.
I want to make a comment here because you talked about, dietitians who aren't in the culture, understanding of the culture may ridicule someone. And I had another word is the idea of people feeling like they're being judged.
Yeah.
And I want to go down this path because I think it's an important lesson for our listeners. Talk about culture, and specifically, I want you to talk about Black culture and how it relates to the food of the people.
Right. Well, you've got the term soul food, and people tend to just think of soul food as this high fat, unhealthy type of eating style. But they don't realize that the soul foods, you can go back to the slave master and back to slave eating and the idea that, the slaves weren't given the healthiest food and they weren't given the healthiest meats. And so they had to make those meats and things taste better. And so much of the cookies come from that. But I have went further back than that. I have went all the way back to Africa. The book that I am looking at is, I'm not going to tell you the title, but it's going to, the book I've been working on. It really traces the soul foods all the way back to the continent of Africa. Some of the basic foods in the soul food diet, the greens, the sweet potatoes or yams, the okra is actually an African word. And that all of those, even the peanut and peanut butter and the seasonings and spices and things are the natural seasonings, spices and foods that are used in Africa. If you look at some of the African dishes and look at the American soul food diet, they are so similar. So I say that that was the biggest hidden secret, that soul foods is African foods, foods that sustain the nation. I did a whole talk on that and then looked at the similarities and things of African diet and the soul food diet and the similarities of them. We have assimilated other things into the diet. and stuff like that. But I always said, you think that Africans and African Americans and Black slaves became such good cooks because they just thought it up here in America? They were cooking some of these dishes in Africa. They just continue cooking in America, you know. And so that's where some of the when I started looking at all the hidden history of food that was lost, and that almost they were saying our cooking and our eating habits started from slaves, and it didn't. And another talk that I said is, if we were the strongest of all people, eventually being the best slaves and the best people to work sunrise to sunset, then how was we eating before they got us here to be that strong? That's where sometimes, and then I've had people say, oh, you're going too far. But now you'll find food ways and cultural ways and lots of books and different people who have looked at that and discovered that the base of some of the healthiest foods for African Americans have their roots back in Africa and has come here. The foods of, the major food of Cameroon is collard greens, national food, you know. And so, I mean, to me, the rediscovery and to really bring that back to the community to say our foods is not bad. One thing that made me start looking at it is I received no education about soul food in college, or African eating or what's healthy. And I felt like after I left, I was uneducated because I was trying to go to our community and talk to them. Yet I learned about the Japanese diet, the German diet, I learned about the Italian foods. I learned, about different things. But if you look at that Ansel Keys study, with the different country studies, Japan is down here, but there's an African country down there too. They never mentioned that African country ever. So I was like, wow, why aren't they saying anything about how African diet is healthy? And so that kind of made me I felt uncomfortable going to our community and not being able to tell them anything about our eating. So I did my own research. What I've learned over time is my own research.
It's interesting that you say that, because I made a note to hear that you're speaking of a celebration of the heritage as it goes back to Africa. And let's look at it. The idea of the healthiest foods are those that are fruits and vegetables grown in the local climate, prepared in the local way. And I was struck by your comment of we were the strongest people who could work from sundown to sunup. Diet has to play a role in that. And I also want to make this comment, Yvonne, and you can react to it any way you like, but we talked about the idea of structural racism. And I would surmise that you weren't taught about soul food because dietitians were primarily white people, and the curriculums were developed by whites.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was the only African American in my class when I went through the whole dietetic program for 4 years, and it was almost as if they were all thinking that I was going to cheat off their papers. If I just look up and try to think, they think I'm trying to cheat or something. And I was totally ignored until I became a senior. And then when some of the students figured that I wasn't going anywhere, then they started letting me in. It was a very hard time during that time to go through as much science and stuff and almost be isolated out, not having partners or anything. The system did almost say, well, buddy up with a partner, do a partner, and no one wanted to be my partner. The only one left, if there was an odd number, I just was my own partner. But if there was, if somebody was left over, then they got to be my partner. I mean, going through the field, it was not set up to acknowledge anything about African Americans, other than the fact that they had this soul food diet that was high in fat and they shouldn't eat that. Which, when I first came to the health department, I thought that I said that one of my thoughts was to make this display on eat right, culturally and traditionally and healthy, and to have what is the healthy traditional foods of the Chinese, what's the healthy traditional foods of the Hispanic population, what's the healthy traditional foods of the African American, and then you have your American food pyramid. And to be able to interchangeably, depending upon what culture I go to, use the healthy food for the outreach for them, to show this is the healthy foods in a Hispanic diet, this is the general food pyramid. At the time, the director said, "Oh no, we can't do that. That doesn't even make sense." So it didn't throw my idea out. I just said she just don't want to do it. So when I became director of the nutrition department, guess what we made? We made the 4 panels with the food pyramid, with the outreach to each different culture, because I truly believed every culture is raised in the foods of their culture. And every culture has healthy foods and less healthy foods. And that every culture can, survive on the foods of their culture. And so to say that soul foods is 100% bad when you have people who live their whole life eating it, and yeah, they might end up getting diabetes. They may end up getting hypertension. Other cultures get diabetes and hypertension too on the foods that they eat. Why ours has to be the demonist one? So there is a whole program through Old Ways of the African American heritage diet, and they have recipes. They have people that sign on to do that, to bring the African culture back in. So there's a lot more now than it used to be.
Well, there is that idea of the resurgence of the Black community, and that we won't be stilled. And I was thinking 2 things, Yvonne, when I heard about the microaggressions against you, how hard that must have been. I'm also going to say this because I think it goes back to your heritage. It's like somebody said in your backstory, and dietitians don't take nothing from nobody. And I think that's really, what, you didn't give in and you didn't give up, but you thrived because of who you are. Yeah. And someone, I would sure that the powers that be would have said, well, we tried to work with her, but she just couldn't make it. But you wouldn't be held down.
And in the Dietetic Association, I have, again, my family taught us that we just take challenges, that this idea that you could be anything that you want. I think we actually believe that if that's what we wanted to be, that's what we were going to be and stuff. And the idea of being in a professional dietitian and working within the system to improve it. The idea that I felt that I had to self-teach, but it didn't make me say I'm not going to be a dietitian anymore. It made me say that I need to work harder to try to change the system. And see, some people feel that there's nothing that needs to be changed in the Dietetic Association, that we're all kumbaya and everything's fine. But guess what? Students of African-American students are still telling these stories. They're still telling stories of being isolated. They're still telling stories about even how instructors have offended them. And then they're coming to us to help them to be strong. And, the idea that we feel like we have to be strong to be dietitians is, it's like, when is this ever going to change? Even though, we're excelling under duress. So I tell people, I got a little PTSD of racism from being a professional dietitian, African-American professional dietitian, trying to survive in not just the dietetics, but in the healthcare system in general.
I want to talk about that. One of the things that our listeners probably don't know about you is your influence on the national stage around nutrition. Yeah. Can you talk about, and for our listeners, Yvonne was the president of an organization called NOBADAN, the National Organization of Blacks in Dietetics and Nutrition. We had many conversations about your national work. I want you to talk to the listeners about Novodan and what you instilled in other nutrition experts from the Black community.
Okay, thank you for bringing up Novodan. Novodan is a member interest group of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And at one time, it was a networking group of Black dietitians that would get together. When I was, starting to go to the national conference, so we have a big national conference every year, it was like being isolated in a whole zone of people who were part of groups and different things that had receptions and all sorts of things. And there was nothing for the Black dietitians to go to. We weren't invited to anything. We weren't invited in. It was just like a little isolation thing. Nobody came up to me and said, "Oh, did you get our reception?" And I'm like, "No, nobody's ever said, they haven't never invited me in." Nobody invited me in, and then I seen all these dietitians from all over the country. Got to meet a dietitian called Gladys Kubis. She was in Washington State. She did the first prototypes for the microwave oven, and looked at the nutritional value of the foods that's cooked in them. Brilliant people, Fulbright scholarship, way back in 1945. So, this opened up a whole world for me. And I was in the organization. They nominated me for some national positions, but I felt before I stopped being involved at the national level, I needed to give back to Novodan. And that's when I actually became chair of Novodan. And Novodan does a lot with mentoring students from all the historical Black colleges. They do a lot with education and opportunities for young, new dietitians coming into the field, trying to break that isolation type issue, because it can get depressing if you feel you're the only one and you're isolated and you're fighting against the system. This Novodan shows dietitians coming in that you can make it, you can flourish in this here organization, and you have people that understand how hard it is. The idea that you have dietetic internships that you cannot work and you don't get any stipend. So that means that your family or someone needs to support you for a whole year. That is almost impossible. Some dietitians today, registered dietitians, are taking in interns into their home so that they can live that whole year and not have to worry about trying to figure out how they're going to live and how they're going to eat. This is how, and when people think everything is equal, no, it's not. It's a struggle to become a registered dietitian. And now the rules are going to be changed, wherein they're going to add the master's degree before you can sit for the exam. So now it's even going to probably be even less African Americans going into the field instead of more. I also sit on the advisory group for the MATC, Milwaukee Area Technical College Dietetic Technician Program, 2-year associate degree program. And that many times help people to get that initial degree. They can make some money, and then they can go on and maybe get the final 2 years to become an RD. Well, now it's going to take even longer. So this is, this whole issue about nutrition, dietetics, being able to increase the amount of people of color, so that going in the community, it's not always a cross-cultural thing, that you can develop that rapport quicker. Now, I could say that there are Caucasian white dietitians who took the time to learn, to become culturally sensitive, to understand the link between the soul food. I guess keep thinking about it. I didn't really say soul food is a food that nourished a weary soul. After those working from sunrise to sunset, it replenished. When you talk about those beans and the greens and the sweet potatoes, those are loaded with vitamins and minerals, soluble fiber, which is good for your cholesterol, proteins, rich protein in an abundance of and beans, greens, sweet potatoes, yams, foods of Africa. And many people had little, what they call gardens, that they grew their own fruit and vegetables right outside their house. and that replenished whatever, gave them more substance to whatever they would get as rations from the slave master. So there is a lot going on there.
You know, I was thinking as you were saying that, and I learned something new today. So thank you for educating me like you do every time. But the slave master can have my body, but you can't have my soul.
Nope. Nope. And there was a lot of soul building in that time when they wasn't in those fields. You know,
food for the soul.
And then carrying on traditions, carrying on heritage. And so when people would get around that Sunday meal, when they get around that food that was made with love, because we know you're tired, we know you're weary, but we're making this with love to replenish you. It means so much. So to say, you just stop eating that, people are not going to stop eating it. Not going to stop eating it because it was bonding. It's so much more context that go with that meal.
The context, it goes deeper than that.
Right.
You know, I want to talk about this at this point. How do we make sense of, Yvonne? African Americans are at highest risk for heart disease, at highest risk for cancer, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, obesity. Help me to understand and help our listeners to understand what's going on from the community and lifestyles perspective of these diseases.
I think one underlying thing that many people don't understand is that people are living with constant stress and constant trauma, and from racism, from inequality, from that idea of not having enough income, living from paycheck to paycheck. And the people who you think have made it, and I'll give you my situation because I don't tell anybody's situation. I was a single, I ended up was a single parent raising 2 children. I used to tell people, yes, I make a very good salary, but is it enough to cover 2 people? Because if I was married and there was 2 incomes coming into the house, then I can see that my salary was going to be really good for the family because I had another full income with it. But when you're making a good salary and it's only 1 income and you got to divide that to pay for every bill, everything in the house, plus maybe have to help your mama out and help your brother out and do this and do that, then that 1 paycheck doesn't look like it's really as much as people think. So, you know, even the people who people feel is making it may be struggling because they don't have that cushion, that they don't have all of those things in place, and then your family don't. Like, say, for instance, I have a car, my brother has a car, we have to take our time to help the people who don't have transportation. And then when they get us, then they say, well, I need to go to the bank, but if you have time, could you take me here, take me there? So 1 trip might turn into 3, 4. But then you put it in your mind, I'm the privileged one. So yes, I have to give to them to keep them going because we all in this life together. So the idea that people have this underlying struggle and then you put racism in there and then they're battling this and that, it's a stress on you. And I think with that stress, stress and trauma, the idea that you can just say that people want to do everything perfect for their health. They're going to run, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. Sometimes it's a time thing. They just ain't got time in the day to try to do all those things. And then they're upset all the time. I had to pull back on even looking at the news there for a little while because when they started having all of the incidents of hangings being found here, there, and everywhere, I was waking up crying every morning. During this time with everything that's been going on, George Floyd, everything, the stress and the pain is real, and people push that down and just keep going. But pushing that down and having that stress and all that, you know, that changes your hormones, it changes your cortisol levels, that changes different stuff, and you're living in this highly stressed life all the time. That, you know, some people say it's not an excuse. It's real. And as things go on, if people really look at racial equity, if really people really try to change the life environment, so that people don't have to feel that they've got to explain themselves, or if they're mad about certain things, that you got to suppress it. Like, you know, you're going to be the angry Black woman if you get mad because nobody wants to serve you at the counter, or that, you know, you're waiting there just to get checked out at a department store, and everybody seems to be, you know, being helped, and then they say, just wait. Now you wait about 20 minutes, and then somebody else might come up to the counter and they still want you to wait. And after a while you start saying, well, am I ever going to get, you know, see, you know, that must have happened to me. If I'm saying this, and see, I said that to one of my white friends. I said, you know, what really gets me is when you can't get service at the counter, or when you walk into the department store. I said, you know how when they follow you around and stuff, and I didn't know I was saying, you know, when they, and she said, I don't know.
Right.
She said, it never happened to me. Right. I don't know how that feels. And it's like, it's almost like no matter what you've done or where you at or how much you accomplished, you have to be on guard for those things. I mean, if you got basketball players, different people, they take them to the ground and don't even, you know, it doesn't make a difference. That's the mentality, that's the racism, that's the institutional system-wide thing that we're living with every day. And nutrition and eating, after a while, all you want to do is go have some ice cream. You know, I mean, technically, you know, which one is going to be feeding that comfort? The ice cream or the stir fry? For me, the stir fry is just as good. But, you know, for other people, they're going to get the comfort thing.
You know, you were talking about some of the structural things, which I found quite fascinating. And you were talking about, for you, the idea of helping your neighbor with transportation, and one trip may turn into 4, which may turn into more time. Mm-hmm. But it speaks into, if you will, the struggles that the Black community is facing around transportation, housing, adequacy of food. Yeah. And it plays out in the health of the people, because you said you started with the idea of stress and trauma.
Yes.
And for those that have both structural issues and microaggressions, as you spoke about, there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
And yet it still impacts you.
Right.
And so it impacts the health of a people.
And then, you know, to try to understand it, some of us have really pushed the idea of where did this come from? And then when you start looking back and know that it was governmental programs that actually wanted to keep people from moving to the suburbs, that were instituted to make sure people stayed exactly where they were at, that didn't get, you know, veterans the GI Bill, or, you know, that extra money, and they didn't get it, and farmers didn't, you know, Black farmers didn't get the funding, and people trying to do businesses with the same identical credit scores and everything, they don't get it because they have a certain color and the other ones get it, you know, or the rules are adjusted, depends on who you get. I mean, just getting a car becomes a big problem when they say you gotta save up, you know, $2,000. And then I talked to a intern of mine. She said, what you trying to save up all that money for? She said, me and my dad just we go to the place, we pick out what car, we don't put nothing down, and we get a car. And I'm like, what? And I mean, until she said that, I didn't know that there was systems like that, or that they had the flexibility to do what they want for who they wanted to do it for. And so that's where it starts getting, where you really understand you're in a system of racism, not just always just this person don't like me. But one time that's the way they don't like me, they got something. And then when I started really understanding it's a system, at one time when I was at the health department, I'll just tell you this, that I wanted to get advanced. Several times I wanted to get advanced. And the idea that someone told someone, of course it got back to me, that said, why should she get advanced? She makes enough money for a Black woman. She makes enough money for a Black woman that, what, we ain't never gonna, advance you, because who do you think you are? Mm. This one lady, and I don't know her name, I got a video on her, she talks about white rage. And she said the rage isn't just because Black people are moving in. The rage is because of arrogant Black people who think that they should move up. How dare you think you're going to be equal to us?
Yeah, it's another form of white supremacy.
Right. But like I said, I always tell people, we could talk about it, but when you have to live it, it's a whole different story. And I always tell people, I'm not wanting to down people, because I'm going to be leading a group of retired public health people to talk about whiteness and racial equity and racism and that type of thing. And because I always look at it globally, it's like, what do you really want? What do you really want to happen? The equity piece is to say that we need to create a world where everybody can be on the same level. But if you have some people that's so far down and some people so far up, how are you going to move these people up to this level? How does the system have to change? Because if you don't really put any effort in to get to there, these people still going to be here. And this equity is not saying we bringing you down. We want to come up. We want to have policies and procedures. When they say it's equal opportunity, it's really not. It's not equal opportunity, because if someone says Laquita or some type of name that they don't like and that's African American, they automatically say she's not smart. She's not equal.
They call that teaching to the floor.
And my thought, even just think of this. I have a doctor. I go in for health. They take my blood pressures and everything and all my levels. I always tell people, know your numbers. There was a whole campaign saying, know your numbers. Well, because I was Black, the doctor come in with his resident. If I'm starting to ask questions, they're starting to look at, why is she asking so much questions? I'm asking questions about my own health. He had to turn to the intern and says, it's okay to tell her. She's a dietitian. She wants to know. And it was like giving him permission to tell me. But I'm thinking, why aren't you explaining the health parameters of all people to come in so that they can understand their own health? When I was at St. Luke's Hospital, I worked out there, that's, I don't know how it is now, but when I was out there, it was predominantly a white hospital, but everybody can go out there now. But I would see doctors sit down with counseling, white clients with diagrams, with letting them know exactly where their blockage is and exactly this and exactly what this test means and stuff. And they had the people there and they taught them. And when I would see that, when my friends would go in the hospital, I would tell them what to ask and tell them what to ask, and so they could tell you, ask about this. And I would teach them what to ask, because I felt like our people ain't getting it like that. Unless something happens where someone says it's okay, they assume that they are not going to understand. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking it's up to the health professional to make them understand. I've seen it done. But why is it where our people, they just assume we're not going to understand it? No way. That keeps us ignorant, health literacy, that keeps us right there.
Let's talk about this, because of the basis of who you are is this idea of respect. Mm-hmm. And you are a teacher and a mentor. Take us through some of the basics of nutrition and how you want people to think about their diet in a way of empowerment. Now, we don't have time to do all of it, but give us where you begin in that manner of respect.
Well, I think I begin with the building trust, really looking at, respect, getting to understand that individual and what their lifestyle is. before I can actually say how you need to change your diet, I need to see what is your diet, what is your usual eating habits, what is your timing of meals and snacks, what makes up the base of your diet. And like I said, the rapport with them gives them the permission to tell me whatever. Tell me the true thing. I'm not here to judge you. This is your session, so we can see where you think you have the problems, and getting them to be the owner of their own eating habits. So then once we get to that, I can say, and I always do a usual food diary, or a 3-day food recall. I go from the basis of where they're at. I also do a frequency, and then also the idea of what do you like, because if I'm trying to help them to improve their eating, it's got to go on what they're going to choose and what they're going to be like. So with the idea that definitely healthy fruits, fresh fruits, vegetable, whole grains, fish, lean beans and seeds, nuts, kernels, all of the healthy substances, but within that realm of that my plate balance, you have multitude of foods that can make up that diet. And even knowing where are they at? Where are they at in their journey? Have they already been trying to eat healthy? Are they cooking totally Southern style eating? So you got different levels of soul food. I mean, you have some people that already are putting smoked turkey and different things and healthier ingredients, cooking with olive oil, different things like that. They're at that level. And you have other people who are using ham hocks and fat back and different stuff from really, really Southern cooking that is high in saturated fat, and how to get them to switch over, taking them from where they're at and making sure you understand what are the healthy ingredients and healthy foods that make up the diet. Black-eyed peas is the highest soluble fiber food of all, and that is, part of the African American diet. When you start looking at your collard greens, high calcium. Having a cup of collard greens is like having a cup of milk. If people don't drink milk, maybe they're eating collard greens. Look at what makes up that base and evaluate their nutrition and their nutrients that they're getting in. I always say it's what you get in that counts. I'm not overly worried about the other, because if you build up the healthier foods, you're going to be full before you get in all the junk. So, I don't concentrate on just stay away from this, stay away from that, stay away, because that's what it makes it seem like eating healthy is negative. I tell people, I give you permission to eat. That's one of the normalest thing you can do, but the choices that you pick is what's going to make your diet healthier, not if you eat or don't eat.
What happens when you give people that choice and that power to do what they feel like they can like food and still be healthy? What's that like for people?
It's almost like a new discovery. I mean, and I do, I do food preparation exercises, meaning I just don't do food demonstrations where I'm up there showing them. I have them make the food. And when they make something with healthy ingredients that they thought would never taste good, like my blenderized cottage cheese filling for my fruit pizzas, and they said, I never will eat cottage cheese. There's no way you can ever get me to eat cottage cheese. And then at the end, this one lady came up after the class, and I had did the filling with the cottage cheese blended up smooth. She came to me, Miss Greer. I said, what? She looked at me. She was putting her finger in, licking the stuff out of the container, and she said, no one could ever have made me think that I can eat cottage cheese and then enjoy it. And this is low-fat cottage cheese with a little bit of sweetener and some vanilla. And she was in seventh heaven. So it's like an awakening that healthy eating doesn't have to taste bad. But the idea that most people have is that healthy eating is eating white. Some people feel that you got to give up all of your cultural foods to eat healthy. Eating just raw salads. I mean, ain't nothing wrong with raw food, but the idea that you're giving up everything and you're going to eat this way all the time and never eat anything that you really enjoy. And that's not, I tell them, I am not for not enjoying food. I enjoy food. I enjoy healthy food. And you know, because I teach what's in the food, when I start looking at especially something like a stir fry, I'm like, ooh, lycopene, vitamin C, these phytochemicals. Oh, I'm getting this vitamin pill on my plate, and it's all healthy food. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I said, you can, you know, because I used to say, are you eating for pleasure or health? After my class sessions, they know they can eat for both. It's not one or the other. But many people think it's a choice.
I love the idea of an awakening. Yvonne, I've got one more question, and I ask all my guests this. What have you learned from community? This is a days of learning, and so we not only want to teach, but what have you learned from community over your years of working in community?
I've learned that I can get just as much learning from them as they can get from me. Because there's times when I'm in the session, we had one session and I started talking about like, oh, okra is healthy. I never knew we can spend 20 minutes just talking about how you can cook okra. Different recipes, different this and that, how, you know, and I also, even in a supermarket shopping tour, we were just standing in the fruit and vegetable aisle and people were just discussing and everything. And I was like, I can't believe people have such wealth of information to share and to help each other out if we only let them have the voice. Let them share their voice. But you have to create an environment that allows that to happen. And that's what I learned is that, you know, we, you know, as educators, we think we know it all, but no, once we let them have a voice, we learn every day from the people that we interact with.
That is beautiful. And I want to end on that note. Yvonne Greer, you have been a voice for the people around food, around culture, around the idea that we can do better together, as well as I want to honor your heritage, your connection to the community, your mentoring of generations of dietitians, Black and white, as well as your work in our community. It is an honor to know you, to call you friend, and so glad that we're doing this work together. I hope at some point we could get you back again. Can we get you back again?
Sure, definitely, definitely. One thing I will say is that I've been doing a lot of programs recently on nutrition and COVA and boosting immunity, and so many people are, because of all of the higher risk factors and occurrence in the African American community. That's another awakening that people are having, and that people are really delving in and really trying to start really saying, okay, how can I do better? How can I boost my immunity and stuff? So when some people say, well, we can't get people to eat like this, I'm saying, I always tell people, don't always think of what was in the past. Think about what's going on in the future.
Sounds like a topic for another show. Ms. Greer, if people want to get a hold of you, tell us where we can get a hold of you.
Well, you can email me at yeatright.57@gmail.com. That's the best way to just email me. Tell me whatever you want, and then, we can go from there.
Miss Yvonne Greer, you are a joy to me. I want to thank you for your time and thank you for being on the show today.
This has been nice because many times I never get to talk about things like this, openly like this. So that's why I'm really happy to have been able to do this with you. Thank you, David.
Continued health and blessings to you.
I should say Dr. Nelson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
What a powerful episode. Yvonne Greer is a person of the community. She spoke of her early work, the issues that she's faced, growing up, her mother working 2 jobs, but yet there was always food on the table and there was food done with love. She spoke about the idea that she builds her practice out of respect, how she tries to build trust and choice for all people. Yet we know that in many parts of the community, instead of celebrating heritage and celebrating food of the people, that people are told that they shouldn't eat soul food. She really brought to bear the idea that in order to best know what people need, it's to be in a judgment-free zone, and she spoke of that. Yet she also spoke of learning from the community, even at this stage of her life. I want to thank all of the listeners for spending time with us today, and we look forward to our next episode of Days of Learning. I'm David Nelson, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.